Well, good evening, and I just want to firstly thank the Saab household for inviting me tonight for this really Q&A session. I'm very honoured. I've done these sessions before in other homes, and I know they're very, very powerful and very fruitful for those who turn up. So now I also want to just thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. It's always a sacrifice to give up an evening, and I hope you find it worthwhile. So I believe it is just a free-for-all Q&A, and I invite every one of you to ask any question you like, okay? And don't hold back. If perhaps you've got a question which you might think is a little embarrassing, you can maybe write it on a piece of paper and put it in a bucket, and we'll collect a few questions like that, and we can answer those questions anonymously. So who is going to be the first cab off the rank? Yeah, Fred.
I wanted to ask if you have any insight on the first church. So after Christ's resurrection, how it became to be, how we became to create our community or become Catholics.
Yeah. Well, what we know, the first history book of the church is the Acts of the Apostles. Okay, and that's written by St. Luke, and it's written around just after the year 62. Okay, so he records, if you go to Acts chapter 2, there are two verses there, 42 and 46, which tells us that the early Christians gathered around the breaking of the bread. They had the Psalms, the prayers, they had three things: the apostles' preaching, the prayers, and the breaking of the bread. That's a structure there that's still the same today. That's the basic skeletal structure of the church. Because the church is much bigger now, much more elaborate, much more complex. But the apostles' preaching today is the preaching of the Pope and the bishops of the world. The prayers that we believe that were being said in those days were the Psalms, which we still say today in the divine office. We see it in our own parish. You go to St. Charles, you see the monks in the morning and in the evening, they're saying the prayers, the divine office. Some religious orders say that 7 times a day, some 5 times a day. And Jesus, our Lord, would have said the Psalms as prayers as well, and the early Christians did as well, because most of the early Christians were Jews who converted to Christ. And they still kept a lot of their Jewish practices. So the apostles' preaching, the prayers, and the breaking of the bread, and that's the Eucharist. Where was that done? It wasn't done in churches. It wasn't done in synagogues. It was done in private homes. Like what we're doing now is in a private home, people gathered. And we pray, we could have the Mass here if we asked for one. But so that's how it started, and that's how it was for centuries, at least 250 odd years. The first building that has been discovered by archaeologists that is believed to be exclusively built as a church and only for church purposes is in Iraq, in Mesopotamia, on the Euphrates River. A city today called Dura Europos, or that's what it was called in ancient times, and it's dated to the 230s. So the first ever building dedicated just for the celebration of Mass, the Divine Liturgy, the Eucharist, etc., comes from around the mid-3rd century. There might have been others beforehand. There probably were, but we don't know. We haven't discovered them. And it's a development because, and by the way, understand all churches, St. Charles here, the greatest basilicas and cathedrals in the world, are all built as ornaments to the Eucharist, the celebration of the Mass. Okay? And that's why some of them are so magnificent. And they took many hundreds of years to build. I was in Siena last year. The floor alone in the Basilica in Siena took 400 years to complete. The floor alone. That's slower than some of our Lebanese tradesmen today. All right, okay? Okay, so, yeah. So, and almost as expensive as well, okay? But, okay, back to the original question. It was local communities. But when those communities were established in individual cities, the tradition of the church was, the practice of the church is that there'll always be appointed a bishop. And from the very beginning, when we read St. Clement of Rome, late 1st century, St. Ignatius of Antioch, early 2nd century, the bishop's role was central. He is the center figure of the Christian community. And when you read Ignatius of Antioch, now he's Syrian, Antioch, Syria. We could even claim him as Lebanese perhaps. Okay, all right? Okay, because the Maronite patriarch, he sees in Antioch. Okay, he's a successor. Okay? St. Peter was a bishop of Antioch, then Evodius, then Ignatius of Antioch. And Ignatius of Antioch said to his readers when he wrote those 7 letters, you can't do anything without the bishop. You can't baptize, you can't celebrate the Eucharist, and all the presbyters and the deacons work with the bishop. So you see the structure is there. In the primitive church, the essential structure that we have today, bishop, priest, deacon, was there in the beginning and stays today, and the community must gather around the bishop because the bishop has the plenitude of the priesthood. And it's to prevent schism, people doing their own things, chaotic. Why can't you baptize without the bishop or his presbyters and deacons? Because we've got to know who's doing what, who's being baptized. That's why we keep record. You can't have your own Eucharist, private Eucharist, people being ordained and doing their own things privately. There has to be order. There has to be, that's why there has to be a certain control to keep order and certainty. How do I know he's really a priest? Maybe you're a priest. We don't know. We don't know. We can't have chaos. So there was always structure and order and a visible church where we could see the leader, whether it was St. Peter, the apostles, then their successors, what we call the bishops today. Okay? All right. Don't be shy. Charlie.
Can I ask a controversial one?
Of course, I don't expect anything except controversy
from... There's a lot
from
of people these days from our community, Maronites, that are going to this Bishop Murray.
Yeah.
Can you give us a explanation of who he is? Some people say he's an historian. What does that mean? And is it okay for Maronites to go and receive the Eucharist at his masses or whatever? 2
very short answers, and I'll elaborate. He's a good man. He's a sincere man. I'm not judging his sincerity or his goodness. Do we go to his mass and receive communion? No. He's autocephalous. It's a Greek word meaning he's his own head. He doesn't officially belong to any church anymore. He's what we would say a maverick. Okay? The Assyrian Church of the East, I believe, is the church he was officially associated with, and it is Nestorian. I'll explain Nestorianism in a moment. I think they cut him off. I don't know exactly the story. Yeah, he's excommunicated from them. Yeah, and I've read an official communique coming from Lebanon and telling us not to associate with him formally. That doesn't mean you don't talk to him or say hello or wish him well. You be civil and nice to him. As I said, I've watched some of his videos. I agree with some of his concerns, and I agree with a good amount of his moral preaching and teaching. Okay, because it's the same as ours in many ways. But he is, if you want to use stark language, he is schismatic. He is. The Nestorianism is a heresy going back to the early 5th century, which denied that Jesus, denied the term Theotokos, Mary, Mother, God-bearer. Mary, you can't call Mary Mother of God. You can't call her the God-bearer. Why? Because the person in her womb was not God until he came from her womb. So according to Nestorius, Jesus was 2 persons, a human person in Mary's womb, and after he was born, the divine person of the Word enveloped the human person of Jesus. But there was no divinity. Jesus possessed no divinity while he was in the womb of Mary, which is why Nestorius and his followers did not or would not call Mary God-bearer, because Jesus wasn't God in Mary's womb. God enveloped him after he was born. Now, some of the hardline historians would still ascribe to that today. I know there was an agreement between Rome and the Assyrian Church of the East, I think signed in 1994. I don't know the exact contents of that, though I should read up on it. But with Mari, I wouldn't give him any money. I wouldn't go to his mass. I wouldn't receive communion there. I would pray for him, be gentle and kind towards him, and if he says things that are right and proper, we celebrate that, but I don't officially associate with him.
How does the church justify its views of, sometimes seemingly opposing views of Pontius Pilate, Simon of Cyrene? In some gospels they seem to be like showing him in a good light, other gospels they seem to be showing him in a negative light. How do you justify that?
Well, I think for the most part, essentially Pontius Pilate was between a rock and a hard place. Okay, Pontius Pilate was a procurator of Judea, and that he was married to the emperor's daughter, so he had a very close link with Tiberius Caesar, the emperor, and he was given this assignment out there in really difficult territory. Judea would have been one of the worst provinces to govern. But he knew that, and he was governor from AD 26 to AD 36. In the end, he committed suicide because he was guilty of massacring Samaritan pilgrims who were at Mount Gerizim, their holy mountain, and because of that act of brutality, he was summoned back to Rome. And as a consequence of what he feared he was going to face, he committed suicide. Look, he had to govern a very rebellious people, and he was manipulated into a position to do the dirty work of the Sanhedrin, the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the scribes who conspired against Jesus Christ to destroy Jesus. The Roman law, when the Romans dominated a particular region, when they incorporated a territory into their empire, they reserved to themselves the right to exercise capital punishment. And it was called the jus gladii, the law of killing, the law of the sword. Gladii, gladiators, those who fight with the sword. The Romans reserved to themselves the right of capital punishment, so the local authorities were stripped of the power to condemn people to death. Only the Romans could. And because the Jews who saw Jesus as a blasphemer, and he was a blasphemer in their eyes because you, being a man, claimed to be God. Ordinarily, under the law of Moses, you'd stone blasphemers to death. But they couldn't exercise that law of Moses with respect to Jesus because the Romans were the occupying power. So that's why they set him up to Pilate, claiming that he is claiming to be a king. He's a rival to Caesar. Anyone who's a rival to Caesar has to be punished. So they were trying to get Pilate to do their dirty work. And eventually they succeeded. Pilate is still at fault because in his conscience, from what we read from the Gospels, is that he knew Jesus was innocent and that he was just being set up by people who were jealous of his fame or hated Jesus, resented Jesus because Jesus would attack them for their hypocrisy and their sin and etc., etc. So what we can gather from the gospel data is that Pilate, in his conscience, knew Jesus was innocent, but he was wedged by these forces which could have erupted into rebellion. And so to try and quell that rebellion, he gave in to their demands. So he, instead of just scourging Jesus, he relented and gave him up to be killed. Of course, he put him forward to the mob on that day when the mob had the privilege to ask for any prisoner to be released. They demanded Barabbas. So he was outmaneuvered. He was hoping that Jesus' followers would turn up in numbers and call for Jesus, and then he will release Jesus. So he knew Jesus wasn't deserving of death, but he still submitted to it out of cowardice or fear. So in that sense, he was guilty. And then when you read John's Gospel, chapter 19, Jesus actually said to Pilate, the person who gave me up to you is guilty of greater sin. So Pilate was guilty of a sin because he allowed an innocent man to be put to death. But Jesus said, the man who sent me to you, or had me arranged all this, who brought me before you, was guilty of even greater sin. All right. You wouldn't want to be in Pilate's position, but Pilate did have the power to release Jesus, and he didn't exercise that power. His wife even warned him. It's in the Gospel of Matthew. His wife remember, is a powerful woman. She's the daughter of the emperor. And she said, have nothing to do with this man, this innocent man. I dreamt last night we suffered much on his account. Interesting, isn't it?
But if he didn't give him up, we wouldn't have had the redemption story.
Well, see, this is it. There has to be bad actors in this. Jesus comes into the world, and the mission that he comes into is to offer a free sacrifice to God the Father to do and to atone for the sin of the world, an act of reparation for the sin of Adam and Eve, one that reverses the sin of Adam. Okay, and there has to be bad guys somewhere in that equation. But all these bad guys, we must understand this. Judas Iscariot, Annas and Caiaphas, Pontius Pilate, they are all still free agents. They are all themselves freely committed these acts and guilty accordingly. None of them are preordained as if they're robots or programmed by God to do what they did. They did what they did, and it was foreknown by God, and that's how God allowed it, and allowed that in all those actions of these bad men, bad people, into the equation to affect the greater good, the greatest of all goods, which is the redemption of the world.
Well, sorry, just on that. So if you did allow it, would they still be condemned for their actions?
Yeah, because they did their actions in bad conscience, freely and in bad conscience.
But had they not done that, then that would have altered our whole existence pretty much.
Well, this is the mystery. This is the dilemma. God doesn't create anyone for damnation. God doesn't inspire anyone to commit sin. So God creates everyone out of love, for love, and destined for heaven. If someone fails in love and fails to reach heaven, it's because of their own fault. It's just that God, this is how we have to try and explain it. God does take the greatest good out of these evils. That's the redemption of the world. Now, when you read Scripture, God hardened his heart. God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. You go to Romans 9, that's repeated there. God hardens the heart of Pharaoh. That doesn't mean that God made Pharaoh sin. This is Calvinism. It's a Protestant heresy from the 16th century. Hardening someone's heart means, okay, all right, I'm speaking to you, Fred, all right? I'm concerned for you. I want you to do good, to be good. I give you many warnings. I give you many opportunities, and you reject them all. And the more you reject, the worse your hell will be. Because I'm still merciful towards you. I stop giving you graces, so you stop wasting graces, and you stop piling up greater punishment for yourself. I harden your heart by abandoning you to your own will. I don't make you bad. I don't cause you to be bad. I don't cause you to sin, but I've stopped giving you blessings and graces to stop you wasting more, to stop piling up more condemnation for yourself. That's the hardening of the heart. God abandons someone to their own will. Because he knows, and only he knows, that no matter what he does give to that person, they're still going to continue to waste them, freely waste them. All right? God does not will anyone to damnation. God does not inspire anyone or cause anyone to sin. That is, all sin and ultimate damnation is due to our own abuse of our own freedom. Yeah.
During the trial, Jesus' trial, the Jews said, or the mob said, "His blood be upon us and upon our children."
That's what the high priest said.
High priest said that.
Yeah, he himself said that.
Are there any implications of that statement?
Yeah, we have to be very careful. When they made the movie The Passion of the Christ in 2004, the contemporary Jewish community worldwide wanted that line removed. So what Mel Gibson did is he kept the Aramaic, he kept the line said by the high priest, but he didn't provide the English translation. Okay? The implications of that, firstly, let's start with today's Jews, and Jews since, say, who didn't know Jesus. The implications for them, none of them are personally guilty of the crucifixion of Christ. They can't be. They weren't there. They didn't know him. If they don't accept Christ today or any time in the past, because they were born Jewish and raised Jewish, they'll be judged by God according to their conscience. Whether what they knew, what law they knew, what graces they received, how they lived according to the law they knew and the graces they received. That's the golden rule for everybody. God does not damn you. You're Muslim, you're going to hell. You're Jew, you're going to hell. You're Buddhist, you're going to hell. You're a Catholic and you're a bad Catholic, you're going to heaven. That's not how it works. God gives us one road to salvation, that's Jesus Christ. He's the way, the truth, and the life. It's God's will that we preach this gospel and everyone in the world converts to Jesus Christ, follows him, and goes to heaven through him. But that's the same God also knows that not everyone is, probably most people will never have a chance, most people who were ever born and lived in this world will not have the chance to hear the gospel and to know for certain that it's true. So how does God judge them, including these Jews? He judges them according to their conscience. Only God can penetrate into someone's heart and mind and see whether they are sincere. What law did you know? Did you follow that law? What graces did I give you? And how did you respond to those graces? So there are people who are not Christian, who are trying to do God's will as they know it. They're in error. It's through no fault of their own. They don't know they're in error. And they have no means ordinarily to get out of error. And then they die in that state. So they're going to be judged according to their conscience. But if I'm Jewish today, Muslim today, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, and I realize there is a God, and Jesus Christ is true, and he's the Son of God, and he founded a church, and I have to, when I realize the truth, I have to embrace it. If I don't embrace it, I'm not in good conscience, and I won't be saved. You see? I'm giving you textbook answers. Only God can sort out all this mess, right? The human mess. We must still be on mission and proclaim Christ to the world. We can't sit back and relax and say, oh no, they don't need to know Christ because they'll be judged according to their conscience. We'll be judged for not being on mission to them, right? When we go on mission to them, we're trying to give them the full truth and the means of salvation. We want to give them the gospel, and we want to give them the sacraments and the mass so they have the access to graces that will help them live the moral life, the life God wants them to live. Now, the implications for the Jews for that statement, as a nation, they are dispossessed of Judea. Now, when you read the whole Old Testament, and right now I'm rereading the major prophets. So I've read recently Isaiah, Jeremiah, Baruch, Lamentations, and I'm halfway through Ezekiel. And the common theme there, and they're really severe writings. The prophets were severe people. They were serious people. And they were commissioned to bring the Israelites, the Israel in the north and Judah in the south, back to fidelity to the covenant with Moses, and to repent of all their horrendous sins, their idolatries, their human sacrifice, their sexual immorality. I mean, I'm reading Ezekiel last night. He is storming against adultery, harlotry, injustice, economic, social injustice. The sins of Israel and Judah were enormous. And for your sins, you will be dispossessed of your land. Assyria will come and take the 10 tribes and uproot them and scatter them to the other side of the Euphrates, never to return. And Babylon will rise up and destroy Assyria, and then descend upon Judah and destroy Jerusalem, destroy the temple, and take you into slavery in Babylon. And the remnant will return 70 years later. And then the Medes will rise up and they'll destroy Babylon. These are the prophecies I'm reading in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, etc. For rejecting the Messiah. 40 years later, that's one generation, it's a biblical generation, they were dispossessed of the land. The Romans came and did even worse than what the Babylonians did.
70 AD.
AD 66 to 70. In August AD 70, they finally entered Jerusalem. They destroyed the city. They destroyed the temple. It has never been rebuilt. They cannot have sacrifice without the temple and the temple instruments. And they enslaved 90,000 of them. And there was worse to come. There were 2 more revolts for the Jews, AD 117-18, in Mesopotamia and North Africa. Over 1 million died. Over 1 million died in the Jewish revolt of AD 66 to 70. If you read Josephus, The Siege of Jerusalem, it's the most horrific you could read. The mothers were eating their children, right? When you, in the revolt of the diaspora in Mesopotamia and North Africa, AD 117, 118, over 1 million Jews were killed as well. And in the Bar Kokhba revolt of AD 132, 135, the Romans finished off the countryside. And so the consequences for the Jews for rejecting Christ, they were dispossessed of the land. And because this is controversial, a lot of people won't agree with this today in the Catholic Church. But the new Israel is the church. Israel, old Israel, is the roots. It's connected to the flower. The church is the flower. Modern day Israel today is a political construct, and it's for modern Jews. It's constructed by the Zionist movement and the United Nations. The Jews have to have a homeland. I don't disagree with that. The Palestinians have to have a homeland as well. I avoid the extremes of, Netanyahu, no Palestinian homeland, and, and destroy Israel. I avoid the extremes. I believe there has to be a compromise, sharing of the, as it was originally Resolution 182 of the United Nations in 1947. Okay, I'm digressing here, but the Orthodox Jews today consider the modern state of Israel an abomination. Do you know that? You know the hardline Jews, the Orthodox Jews, the black hats with the curly hair? They reject the modern state of Israel, even though they're protected by the modern state of Israel, even though they're exempt from military conscription, because they believe only the Messiah can restore Israel. And the Messiah didn't create this modern state of Israel. The Zionist movement for them is a blasphemy. The Messiah hasn't come. Only the Messiah will restore Israel. And by the way, that's another reason why Jesus Christ was rejected. because he wasn't the type of Messiah most Jews were expecting. They were expecting a Messiah who could be a military kingly figure like King David and Judas Maccabeus, who come on a white horse with armies and legions of angels, and they'll cast out the Romans and purify the country of all pagan influence, Greco-Roman and other pagan influences, and they'll reunite the original 12 tribes, territory from the Nile to the Euphrates. And the Messiah, this victorious, glorious messianic figure, will be crowned on Mount Zion, southwest of the Temple Mount, and reign undisturbed to the end of the time. Well, Jesus didn't do that. First, he came on a donkey, not a white horse. Second, he came with no army, just these 12 guys who were pretty clueless most of the time. And that's what the Gospels say. I'm being respectful. That's what the Gospels say, right? Okay. He didn't go to war against the Romans. He said, love your enemies. Even worse, pay taxes to the Romans. Now, you don't tell anyone from the Middle East to pay taxes and expect to remain popular, right? Okay? So Jesus is doing the opposite. Love your enemy. Pay taxes to Caesar. What's going on? And I know it's humorous, but it's the fact. That's the reality. Now, you go to the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 1, and there's Jesus on Mount Olivet, about to ascend into heaven. And someone in the crowd there's Our Lady, there's the 12 apostles, or 10 of them, and there's the 120 all up, and someone asks him, Lord, is this the time when you're going to restore the kingdom of Israel? What's all that about? Lord, is this the time when you're going to be the Messiah that we've been waiting for to restore Israel? Jesus didn't come to do that. He created a new Israel, the church, universal, through the Jews, for the Jews, and for everyone else in the world. A universal Israel without national, racial, or geographical boundaries. That's the new Israel. So even then, at that moment after Jesus had risen from the dead, there's still his closest followers. Some of them still have this limited view of the mission of the Messiah. So, look at the Israeli flag today. What does it look like? Star of David in between what? It looks like a Canterbury Bulldogs flag, blue and white, doesn't it? No, it's 2 bars.
Pretty evil.
Horizontal bars, right? Those 2 blue bars represent 2 rivers. Euphrates and the Nile. That's the original land promised to Abraham. So these peoples today, they're fighting for the same territory. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. River to the sea, Jordan to the Mediterranean. But the Israeli concept today, it's from river to river. Nile to Euphrates. Why? Because we're the descendants of Abraham. This land was promised to Abraham. But what we have to understand, the promise is for a purpose and it's conditional. The whole point of forming the chosen people was not to elevate a certain people racially above others. It was to prepare a people so that for the coming of the Messiah, so that God would become man. And in the end, the true Israel was the Virgin Mary. All those peoples, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 sons, the 12 tribes, and how they gradually whittled down. In the end, Israel in its purest form was the Virgin Mary. Because the Israel was formed so that God can become man. And that person was the Virgin Mary. God became man through her. The purpose of Israel was fulfilled in her. And then Israel's its purpose was fulfilled. And Jesus came through them. And Jesus said the Last Supper, they're all Jews then. This is the blood of the new and eternal covenant. Jesus inaugurates the 6th and the last covenant. This covenant was prophesied in Jeremiah 31 and Ezekiel 16. Those 2 prophets spoke that there'll be a new everlasting covenant. When did Jesus inaugurate it? At the Last Supper. With who? Jews. through them and for them. And through them, do this in commemoration of me, through them to the rest of the world. Father does it every day. Father celebrates Mass every day. He's fulfilling the new and eternal covenant. Because it was inaugurated there at the Last Supper. All right. So the consequences for them was that they lost their land. Long answer, yes.
You said that Israel was fulfilled through the mother of Mary. What does that
Virgin Mary.
Virgin Mary. What does that mean?
What was Israel's purpose? Why was it formed? Why did God call Abraham? And because in the calling of Abraham, you hear the words, and from your seed will come the one who will be the blessing to the nations. So Abraham was called so that a people would be formed through whom the Messiah would come into the world. The purpose of forming Israel was to enable God to become man. So who does God become man through? Where is the pointy end of this project? The pointy end of this project, God becomes man through one person. And of all those numerous descendants of Abraham that numbered as the stars, only one of them would actually be the person through whom God would come into the world. That's the Virgin Mary. So the Virgin Mary is the end point of the purpose. She's the fulfillment, the end point of the purpose, the whole purpose of Israel in the first place. Because she's the one who says yes on behalf of herself, on behalf of the Jews, on behalf of all the Israelites, the descendants of Abraham, and on behalf of the whole of humanity. She says yes, and then she becomes the gate of heaven, enabling God to come out of heaven through her as the gate into the world. It's very profound. This is why we as Catholics, we have this great devotion to the Virgin Mary, and it's correct. Protestants are very scared of the Virgin Mary because they think we make her a goddess, so they strip her down to the bare minimum. Our Virgin Mary is like an ice cream with multiple colours. Their Virgin Mary is just vanilla. Right? Our Virgin Mary has all the flavours. We look at every aspect of Mary like a diamond, and every aspect of that diamond we see a particular beauty, and we sing and we praise it. But for them, Mary is just an eggshell. Crack, get what you want, throw out the egg. Good woman, yeah, okay, but that's it.
Cool.
They'll talk about Rebecca, they'll talk about Rachel, they'll talk about any other woman of the Old Testament, Sarah, you name it, Deborah, you name it. Virgin Mary, yeah, Mary gave birth to Jesus, move on. The virgin birth is prophesied in Isaiah 66:7.
Yeah.
Speaks about a wondrous event of a woman who would give birth to a child before she has labour pains. Who has heard of such a thing? Anyone got a Bible there? Okay, look it up for me, Fred. Isaiah 66:7 or 8. And I want you to read it out loud.
Do they believe she's a virgin?
They believe, Protestants believe, question is, do Protestants believe Mary is a virgin? Good Protestants, evangelical, fundamentalist, Pentecostal Protestants would believe she was a virgin in the conception of Jesus, but that's it. Not after. What do you got? Okay. What do we got? Okay. Which book is Isaiah 66? Here we go. Thank you. Before she was in labour, she gave birth. Any mothers here? Put your hand up. Mothers here? Did that happen to you? No. Okay. All right. So you know this is special, right? Okay. Before she was in labour, she gave birth. Before her pain came upon her, she delivered of a son. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? What's Isaiah talking about? Who fulfills that? Who else fulfills that in history? No one. It's her. Isaiah is the 5th gospel. Isaiah has more than a dozen prophecies that relate directly to the coming of the Messiah. And that's one of them.
So what happens to Protestants?
The same. They're judged according to their conscience. Right? I associated with Protestants closely from the age of 15 to 21. At school, Punchbowl Boys, into School Christian Fellowship. I was taken to the Billy Graham Crusade in late May 1979. I went down. Billy Graham is the most famous Protestant preacher in the history of Protestantism. He travelled the world, spoke to hundreds of millions of people. I went to see him. I was invited by my friend Stephen. I went down in their minibus from Punchbowl Baptist here in Arthur Street. May 1979, I'm 15 years of age, and I heard Billy Graham, and I went down. He did the altar call, come down and give your life to Christ. I went down and did it. I was always a believer in Christ, but I had issues. I had a few flat tires, all right? Okay? And I knew I had to shape up. And I associated with them at school, in the School Christian Fellowship. I joined the Punchbowl Baptist cricket team for 6 years. I went to Evangelical Union meetings at law school. I knew a guy at Sydney Anglican named Andrew. Hey, good people, sincere people. In many ways better than us. They know their Bible. They memorize their verses. They want holiness, but they don't have the full truth. Only from the age of 21 onwards, I began to, for the first time, associate with serious Catholics who inspired me and gave me material to read. And then I just discovered what I teach now, especially on the Eucharist. My friend Stephen would say that we used to walk home from Punchbowl Boys. We'd go down Kelly Street towards Carisbrook. I went up Noble Avenue, and my friend Stephen would say, the Baptist Church is the restoration of the first 3 centuries of Christianity. Here I am, 17 years of age, clueless, no idea. I don't know if that's right, but I don't know if it's wrong. I can't refute it. I found out years later, reading the early church fathers, the whole 2nd century, St. Ignatius of Antioch, St. Justin Martyr, St. Irenaeus of Lyon, Tertullian, and those who followed, Origen, etc., all believed in the Eucharist was the body and blood of Christ. They didn't believe it was just bread and wine and a symbol. So that all fell apart. For me, the Protestant world dissolved, fell apart. It's a myth. It's based on a myth. It's ahistorical, right? Saint Cardinal Newman, John Henry Newman, said to be deep in history is to cease to be a Protestant, and he ceased to be a Protestant as a consequence. But they are judged by God like everyone else, according to their conscience. What law did they know? Were they faithful to the law they knew and the graces they received? When we go to heaven, God willing, there'll be plenty of non-Catholics there, but they'll all be Catholic. There's only one religion in heaven. Okay? There's only one religion in heaven. So all these non-Catholics who, by the grace of God, go to heaven, end up Catholic in heaven.
And this applies to converts, so people who turn to born again faith or
Look, I know plenty of Catholics who became born again because they didn't know their Catholic faith. I know not one Catholic in 35 years of doing this work, more, since 1979, that's 45 years, I know of no Catholic who knew their stuff, who practiced their faith, who became Protestant. Every Catholic that I know who became a Protestant of whatever type, not just Protestant by the way, I've taught students and disciples who become Jewish, Islamic, Gnostic, Freemasons, and Protestant. What happened? Somewhere, some way they lost it. They went into a void. They stopped practicing. They stopped believing, right? And they entered this void, and it was filled by some form of Protestantism. But I know of no Catholic who knew and practiced their faith who ever became a Protestant. The Catholics who leave the Catholic Church for whatever, New Age, New Atheism, whatever, they didn't know their faith. They weren't practicing it. They were denied somewhere by someone, their parents, their neighborhood, their parish, their school. Somewhere it failed. And maybe multiple failings at the same time. They discovered something better than what they were. Some of these Catholics, in inverted commas, might have been womanizing, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, all that stuff, and they're just living totally immoral lives thinking they're a good Catholic. Yeah, I go to church on Christmas. Yeah, I'm okay, And then they come and they meet some fervent Protestant and they give themselves entirely to Christ and the whole life is reformed. They're no longer drinking and getting drunk. They're no longer having sex with any prostitute out there. They're no longer on drugs. They're cleaned up. And hey, I'm liberated by Christ. So they see their Catholic life as miserable. And their Protestant life is fantastic. Why should they come back to the Catholic Church? You see the dilemma here? Now, of course, there are plenty of people who came to the Catholic who abandoned drugs, sex, gambling, all that, and they became great Catholics, and that's how it should be, But everyone in the end is judged according to their conscience. That's why we shouldn't judge an individual. We can judge certain things are wrong. That's behavior's wrong. That's bad. That's going to take you down to hell. We can judge, but we can't say, hey, you're going to hell for sure. I can't say it. People have said it about me. I had students at school said that about me. No, I've had some Protestants who've crossed the line and said that about me. You're blind. You're deceived. You're going to hell. Well, they can't make that judgment. I can't make that judgment of anyone. No one can make that judgment of me. Because I can't go into someone's heart and mind to make that judgment. People are sincere, and they're sincere in error. The vast majority of people in the world are in some form of error. I got best friends of mine, relatives, who follow all these weirdo conspiracy theories. They reject the mainstream media, as they should, because it's full of lies. But they go in an opposite extreme and they end up in some parallel universe of unreality. They're good, sincere people. They're not dishonest. And they're still people of faith and integrity and honesty and sincerity. They're judged according to their conscience.
Good question on what you just mentioned, right? So we talk about, for example, the mainstream media telling a lot of lies. On that note, if the person who's spreading the lies, say you're a news presenter or something similar, at what point do we draw the line and say that perhaps they didn't know better? Would they still be judged by spreading those lies, or would we treat them a different way?
Well, okay, it's hard because when I listen to media lies, I get my blood boiling too. Okay, look, if you know something to be a lie, that's fantastic, and you reject the lie. Wonderful. Don't swallow it. As for the news reader, you can presume certain things, but you don't know for sure. That news reader might be into the culture. Jacqueline Nayley for Sydney Morning Herald, I had a few exchanges with her. She called me an extremist. She's probably, because I reject divorce and remarriage. I'm an extremist. Okay? That's how far gone they are. That other guy who writes for the Sydney Morning Herald with the red bandana, Fitzsimons, Peter Fitzsimons. I've had a few exchanges with him, trying to tell us, that the Catholic Church was responsible for Adolf Hitler, etc., etc. They know better. I had an exchange with Ray Hadley. Ray Hadley was so upset when Cardinal Pell was let off by the courts. I don't believe they're telling the truth. I reject their fantasies, their whatever. Do I judge them? Do I know for certain they're lying? I don't know that for certain. I don't know if they're sincere or not. They seem to be. You leave it up to God. I know they're adhering to error, but are they liars? I don't know for certain. Some of them probably do lie. Some of them knowingly peddle falsity. Some of them knowingly don't want the truth. In the end, I had to say to Ray Haddad, 7-0 is a good score in any sport, because he understands that language. The High Court of Australia said Pell is innocent, 7-0, in a 90-second judgment. You don't get better than that in the courts of Australia. But he still believes he was guilty. Yes.
I just wanted to ask a question. Something that I personally struggle with is the representation of the church by virtue of the media, and I guess I would like your insight, if you're happy to give it, about how to combat the rhetoric that people are happy to throw in your face because, for example, most recently, the whole media brigade over Pope Francis's disclosure in fiduciary supplicants about homosexuality, for example, or like XYZ, and how can we affirm that which we believe is right? Because obviously it's become difficult in a time like this.
The media is on a deliberate campaign, most of the media around the world, to discredit the Catholic Church, to highlight all the scandals and the sins in order to turn each new generation more and more against faith, against God, against religion, against Christianity, against the church, etc. There's no doubt about that in my mind, okay? So our response, if you're confronted personally, why are you Catholic? Why do you still belong to that corrupt, organization that houses, that protects pedophiles? I've heard it all, don't I? Okay. Your response is, I follow Jesus Christ, and I follow his saints. I follow the saints in the Catholic Church. I follow Catholic teaching, which is authentic and true and correct, which doesn't advocate or condone any of these sins or scandals. And I follow the good people I know in the Catholic Church. Because in the gospel image, the parables of Christ, one image that he gives us about the church is that it's a net full of fish, and there are good and bad fish in it. It always has been, and always is, and sadly always will. That's the sad nature of fallen humanity. There'll always be people who are called, but who don't always meet the level of the calling.
Wolves in sheep clothing.
Well, there are wolves in sheep's clothing too. But you respond by saying, look, I admit there's corruption, I admit there's scandal, I don't follow that path. I firstly follow Jesus Christ. I follow his saints, Our Lady, the apostles, all the other saints in the history of the church. Sure, there have been bad popes. I've got a talk on bad popes. I've got about 25 bad popes in the talk. There's been 266 popes. So the vast majority are not bad. Okay? So I follow the good, and I know there are good. There's always been bad, but there's always been good.
How do they get that high up as a pope and be bad?
If you read some, Danny, if you read some of the stories, they are shockingly scandalous. Some of the stories are shockingly scandalous. Like you read Benedict IX in the 11th century. I mean, he was a man who was pope 3 times, in the sense that he resigned, took bribes, came back. He was a terrible, terrible, terrible pope. And the popes of there was a series of popes who were just pawns of political movements in Italy. The Medicis, the Renaissance popes, okay. Some popes like Alexander VI, Julius II, they bribed the other cardinals to become popes. It's historical record. Is it something we should deny? No, we can't deny historical reality, but does it affect the authenticity of the papacy as an institution? No. The papacy is given to us by Christ. The church has always had the Petrine office from the beginning. It's established by Christ. We read it in the Gospels, Matthew 16, Luke 22, John 21. Those 3 texts there are proof that Christ appoints a man named Peter to be the rock on which he'll build his church, gives him the keys to bind and loose, to strengthen the brethren, and to feed my lambs, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. The occupants of that office are meant to be saints, most of them have been either saints, great, very good, good, etc. There have been bad apples. You've got institutions, you've got Prime Ministers of Australia, some better than others. Presidents of America, some worse than others. You've got a legitimate office, and you've got good and bad occupants of the office. And some of the men who rose up were ambitious and corrupt, and they got power, and that was a tragedy for the church. But that doesn't mean ever we should leave the church or turn her back on her or abandon the papacy or whatever. We stick to the church Christ founded. And as I've said, there's always been bad, there's always been good. And point to the good. Follow the good. Search for the good. Okay?
On that note, with the recent release of that either supplicant, whatever it's called, yeah, it's a bit confusing. Like, how would you explain it? I've heard from some that it allows the priests to bless same-sex couples together. I've heard others say no, they're not blessing the couple themselves, but the fact that they're coming and returning to the church or something of that nature. But how would you explain it?
All right. This document sadly has caused a real rupture in the church. The whole bishops' conferences who've said they're not going to implement it. Poland, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, all of Black Africa, not all not Northern Africa or South Africa, but the Sub-Saharan Black Africa where the church is growing and very strong, and multiple other bishops and cardinals around the world. This is a real crisis. When Humanae Vitae was brought out in 1968, there was a wholesale rejection as well, but that was rejecting something very good and traditional in the church's history against contraception. The fact that there's so many people out there giving, this is what it really means, this is what it really means. The Pope has had to do it, Cardinal Fernandez had to do it multiple times, means that there's a problem in the document. That what I would advocate is that we have to rewrite paragraph 31. Cardinal Mueller said that, ex-prefect of the Doctrine of the Faith. If I'm a priest and I have a gay couple come up to me, this is me and I can't speak on behalf, we've got a priest here and I'm a bit embarrassed to say what I'm about to say. Okay, he's the priest, I'm not, all right? But if I was a priest and a gay couple came up to me, I would feel obliged to give them a catechesis. That your lifestyle is not what God wants for you. And see how they respond. I would bless them as individuals apart, as human beings. Blessings, the Pope is right, blessings are not meant just for saints. They are meant for sinners. But like what the Africans have said, what the leading African cardinal told Pope Francis, is that he can't find that he can't avoid the problem of scandal if you're going to bless a gay couple when they're together without giving them a catechesis that their lifestyle is immoral. No one wants to talk and say that, or very few. So I would have to be charitable to the persons, because yes, they are human beings, they are created by God, loved by God, destined for heaven. But we have to catechize them to let them know that, okay, you might be attracted to each other, you've got same-sex attraction, you love each other, but it's not God's will that you engage in sexual activity with each other. That's disordered. That's immoral activity. And my counsel is that you live as brothers only. You don't engage in sexual activity anymore. If they accept that, thanks be to God. If they don't, they walk away freely. I will bless them as separate individuals with a blessing to help them be faithful to God, Christ, the church's teachings, and to be chaste. That's what I would do. That's me personally.
What was Article 31?
It has the word couples in it, and that's where the battle has been fought. Okay, the Pope has said, and thankfully he has said it, that we're not blessing the union. Cardinal Fernandez has said it multiple times. And the document itself, I've read the document 6 times, okay? And for me, that tells me that the document is problematic if I have to read it 6 times to find out exactly what paragraph 31 is trying to say. But the document does say that these unions, not just same-sex, but that the irregular unions, are not moral. It says that. But then when you're blessing a couple, what are you doing? Why are they a couple? We're not blessing the union because it's not moral in the eyes of God. I tick on that. But when you're blessing the couple, how are you avoiding the image of blessing the union so that it's not scandalous? It looks like you're blessing. I mean, look, let's be frank here. People like Father James Martin in America, they're making hay with this. He's publishing pictures of him blessing 2 men together. The last picture was the 2 men holding hands, and he's blessing the hands. He's blessing the union. That's what he's doing. That's what he wants, and that's what he's doing. And he's saying he's fulfilling the document. I think that's a bit of a porky when he says that, right? But the document needs not just verbal clarification. It needs to be that paragraph reworded, because this issue is going to go to the next conclave. I have no doubt about it.
Why doesn't the Vatican just come out straight out forward and say we are not blessing the union?
Well, Francis has said that. He has. He has said it in a public audience. He has said that. I've heard him say it on film.
Yeah, but the media won't do that.
The media came out straight away with its usual very bad reporting. Pope allows blessing of gay unions. Of course they did. They're singing and dancing. But what I'm worried about is those. But what I'm worried about is that good Orthodox Christians and good Protestant people, they're scandalized by this. And that's a tragedy. We want union with the Orthodox. Half of my family are Orthodox. We want union with them. We cannot do anything that will harm the possibility of that union. If we ordain, to the ladies here, if we ordain women to the priesthood, union is over forever. Over forever. One thing that Francis has said consistently, and thanks God, is that he's made it very clear that it's not God's will to ordain women to the priesthood, because he says the church has a Petrine and a Marian side, a male and a female side, and the priesthood is the Petrine side for men. So it's not going to happen in his time. Yeah.
What's a bit confusing is sometimes when you speak to theologians or priests, they say that the Pope can't approve things against God's teachings, or the Holy Spirit won't allow it. So how can, let's say not this Pope, let's say a Pope in 50 years' time, how can he approve women priests?
It won't happen.
But let's say it did happen. Is it possible?
Infallibility of the Pope is a charism that operates in very limited circumstances. A Pope is only infallible when he's teaching as Pope. I'm Pope, I'm sitting in the chair of Peter, and I'm going to make this statement which relates to either faith or morals. And I'm speaking to the whole church, the universal church, not just to the church in America or Australia or Britain or Africa or Lebanon or whatever, the whole church. And I'm deciding the matter, determining it once and for all. Now, all of Pope Francis's interviews in the newspapers or the television, on the aeroplanes trip, none of them are fulfilling those 4 criteria. None of them. Okay? It's a very, very rare occasion when the Pope, as acting alone, speaks infallibly. Very rare. What is more common is the ordinary magisterium, the everyday formal teaching of the popes, not in a TV interview or on the plane being asked questions, but when he's bringing out documents. Okay? Now, Fiducia Supplicans is a declaration. It's a very serious document of the church. Does it breach faith and morals on the church's teaching relating to marriage and homosexuality? No, it doesn't. The issue is relating to a pastoral practice. Blessing people is a pastoral practice. The church has always blessed sinners. If you've been blessed, that's an example of how the church blesses. The church blesses sinners every day. It's not a problem to bless gay people, but you can't put it in a situation like you're blessing the union, when the union itself is immoral. You can't bless sin. And in Fiducia Supplicans, quotes the previous document from 2021 saying that you can't bless sin, right? It's just got muddy. And you know what? I didn't create this problem. I'm not the one behind telephoning the Africans or the Ukrainians or the Kazakhstans or the Poles. They see the problem. The Maronites officially haven't said anything, have they? And I think a lot of Episcopal conferences and bishops are not saying anything because I think they're thinking this, that Pope Francis is old and he might not have many years to live, and we'll see what comes next. That's what they're probably thinking.
Well,
Next
they
question.
can't keep on putting it under the carpet.
You're right. No, you're right, and that's why.
Keep pushing it away, thinking this future generation is going to cop it all.
That's what I said. Why I said what I said. This issue will go to the next conclave. In other words, they're going to be looking for a pope who will heal this crisis. This is the biggest division in the church, in my opinion, since the Protestant Reformation. That's
More than Vatican II?
Vatican II as documents. I've read them all, and I can see the good in all of them. It's how you use them. Isn't the Bible distorted and misused by people? The Bible is. Vatican II can be properly used and improperly misused. What happened after the council with the decline around the world is a consequence of many people misusing it. The Vatican Council document on the liturgy never abolished Latin or Gregorian chant. When you read what Sacrosanctum Concilium in 1963 said about what we should do with the liturgy, the problem what followed from 1965 to 69 was that the document of the Vatican II wasn't followed. That's the problem. People talk about, Vatican II turned the church upside down. It's no longer a pyramid with the Pope at the top. It's an inverted pyramid with the people at the top. No, it's not. I've read the document and I didn't see that anywhere. You've got a whole document on bishops and the power and authority of bishops. Where does it say that the church is inverted and the laity run the show? And I'm laity. I'd like to run the show, but we can't. Right? It's run by bishops. People say things about Vatican II which are not there in the text. It's mythology. It's the spirit of the Vatican. What spirit? Share the spirit. You know, possessed demon, more like it. It's fictions. There are a lot of fictions about Vatican II that have led to a lot of destruction.
What about, I think it was Pope Paul VI's quote, the smoke of...
That was 1972 he said that. He was correct. The smoke of Satan has entered into the church through cracks. Because they were working very hard, these people, with their agendas. And look at how fruitful their agendas are. Devastation. Devastation. You got certain bishops around the world, they're telling us how the church should be. They've got no vocations in their own diocese. There are bishops in certain countries telling the rest of the world, you should be like us. They got 1 to 2% of their population going to Mass. And they're trying to tell us how we should be. Sorry. We've got enough problems. It's like the coach of the West Tigers trying to tell Penrith how to play rugby league. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. You know? Any West Tigers supporters here? I feel for you. Don't worry, I'm a Rabbitoh supporter. I went through 22 years of bottom of the barrel. All right? Okay, next. Yes.
With Mara being excommunicated like Father, as you mentioned, so someone like Father James Martin, why hasn't he been excommunicated? How can we achieve excommunication?
I don't know, and we can't. I have my suspicions. I will just say officially, I don't know why he's not been excommunicated, and we can't do it.
Just going back to women priests, why does the church allow women to give communion?
Extraordinary.
It can, and it has. In the ancient church, there were deaconesses. There wasn't an ordained ministry, it was a service ministry. The Pope has a commission at the moment to investigate the nature of the ancient diaconate and the role of females in the diaconate. It's the third commission on this. The first two commissions in 2002 and 2016 thereabout, both said, and I've read them, I've read the documents, the role of women in the early church was to serve other women. Deaconesses in the early church served other women. To understand, there was a lot of adult baptisms, and they fully immersed men and women, and you know, they're virtually naked. So the women were baptized with other women to help them. Women took communion to Christians in prison, in persecution, etc. They carried communion. These are pastoral necessities. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. As the church was liberated and its structures were more formalized and etc., then basically deaconesses eventually disappeared, and they were replaced by the consecrated virgins, women who ended up living lives as in community, and then there were the first religious orders of nuns and sisters. That's how the deaconesses evolved, etc. And that's why they disappeared. And when the church became liberated, we had a lot more men coming forward to be, you know, deacons, priests, clergy, etc. So the need for them, you know, just naturally, organically faded away. We can have deaconesses today, like in the ancient church. But it's not an ordained ministry. It's not part of the sacrament of holy order. You see the difference? They'll be called deacons or deaconesses, but they won't be. They'll be appointed. They'll be trained, you know, and they'll be commissioned, but not through a formal ordination ceremony with the laying of hands. Okay? So I would suspect that Pope Francis would be happy to reintroduce that ancient form of female diaconate. But he won't introduce a female diaconate that involves ordination by a bishop, because then it's part of the sacrament of holy orders.
Do they have to have some kind of qualification?
They have to be trained, no doubt about it. I mean, if you're an acolyte today, serving and distributing communion, you have to be trained, right? And you know, these are you're participating in sacred rites, and you know, and it's got to be done in a serious, solemn, reverential manner.
This is a bit conspiratorial, but
I believe in conspiracies, don't worry.
okay.
Because I'm involved in many of them.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, go ahead.
The Vatican archives.
Yeah.
Why hasn't any public person been able to gain access?
That's not true. There are public people accessing them as we speak.
And what's in
The secret archive, they make a big deal about the word secret. Vatican documents are not secret as in the sense that we're hiding something. They are ancient records going back to whatever, the Roman Empire. They are magnificent treasure troves of sources and documents, which people can't just walk in and borrow them. Oh, can I have the excommunication hall of Elizabeth first? The original copy, please.
Yeah.
It's and all those. That's secret means just kept under lock and key.
Yeah.
And many of them are irreplaceable treasures. Look, I guarantee you now, there are a lot of conspiracy theories. Oh, secret archives. No, this is nonsense. There are people, as we speak right now, in Rome right now. It's the afternoon. They're doing research and they're having access to documents from the secret archives right now as we speak. The Pope opened them up to investigate the whole pontificate of Pius XII. Whether he really was Hitler's Pope and conspired to have 6 million Jews put to death.
And?
They have found nothing. Zero. It's all fabrications. Fabrications. Trust me. If they found anything, you'd hear about it. You would have heard about it from every street corner. Nothing. What the church did do, there were collaborators with the Nazis, but there were many people who worked hard to rescue, and it's estimated that the secret work of Pius XII rescued 800,000 European Jews from the gas chambers. Well, he was put to death early on. I've been to I've been to Auschwitz. I've been to his cell. He was put to death on the 14th of August 1941. Yeah, so he would have been arrested early on. Once the Nazis came in, and the Nazis then, after they conquered by the end of September 39, they rounded up all the intellectuals as much as possible, and they massacred most of them or imprisoned most of them. And Maximilian Kolbe went into prison, and he was in Auschwitz, and he wasn't put to death as a Jew, or I don't know of any of his work if he tried to save Jews as such. There were many non-Jews in these camps as well. Gypsies and others. Anyone who was an opponent of Nazism and the German occupation. Or Poles who were Catholics, who were just intellectuals, and therefore a threat to Nazi hegemony or domination in Poland. Okay. How are we doing? Yeah.
Okay. How come the church has not, or why is the Book of Enoch considered non-canonical?
I don't know. I can just say that no one has considered it canonical, neither the Jews or the Christians. I don't know the reason, and I've never read it, so I can't say it. I know there's a Catholic Answers video on this. Tim Staples has dealt with it, or someone from Catholic Answers has dealt with it, because I've seen the video, but I've never watched it. I do have the book at home, but I've never read it. Okay, yeah.
What's this about the Gospel of Thomas? Is there a Gospel of Thomas?
Yeah, there are plenty of Gospels. There's over 50 Gospels. There's only 4 canonical. So I've got a collection at home of all the Gnostic works on CD. These are pseudo-Gospels. A lot of them are forgeries. This is the Gospel of Mary. This is the Gospel of Judas. This is the Gospel of Thomas. This is the Gospel of Peter. There's over 50 of them, but they're fabrications. We call them pseudepigrapha. They're false writings. They're mostly Gnostic. The biggest threat to early Christianity, besides the Roman persecution and the perpetual opposition of Jews against Jesus of Nazareth, the other main competition that early Christianity had was Gnosticism, which is Eastern religion, dualistic, from Persia. Mesopotamia, like Zoroastrianism or Manichaeism. This is a religion and that held that there are two equal gods in the universe. So this is dualistic, two, an evil God that created the material world and the good God that created the spiritual world. And they're equal in power, struggling for domination in the universe, and one will never conquer the other because they're equal in power. And material things is evil. And we have to escape from the material and become purely spiritual. This mutated into a Christian form of Gnosticism, which was a real rival to Orthodox Christianity in the first 3 centuries. So you've got St. Irenaeus of Lyon. He writes his main work around the end of the 2nd century against Gnosticism. St. Justin Martyr wrote a book against Gnosticism before him, which has been lost. When you look at the Creed, what we don't realize when we look at the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed is that the first few statements are anti-Gnostic statements. How? We believe in one God, not two. The Father Almighty doesn't share power with another God. Creator of heaven and earth, of all things, visible and invisible. These are anti-Gnostic statements against dualism and the belief that material things are evil, spiritual things are good, and that the good God only created the spiritual world. No, the good God created the spiritual and the material, and there's only one good who's almighty. And that's why when you read Ignatius of Antioch, his letter to the Smyrnaeans, and he's writing this around the year 110, and he's saying that the Docetae refuse to come to our gatherings because they don't believe that the Eucharist is the flesh of Christ. Well, who were the Docetae? The Docetae were Gnostics. Docetae, or Docetists, is a belief system. It's Gnostic. They believed in Jesus, but they didn't believe Jesus had a body. He only had the appearance of a body. Because he's good. If he's good, he can't have something material. He doesn't have a human body. Docetism, dokete in Greek, means appearance. So these are the people who just believe Jesus had the appearance of a body. Now, if you believe in Jesus, but you don't believe he had a body, then you can't believe the Eucharist becomes his body, so they don't turn up to Mass. That's why Ignatius of Antioch is attacking them. Right? It comes together. So Catholicism did not invent the Eucharist. It comes from Christ. He gave it to us. The earliest Christians believed it. I got a joke. Here's a joke. I support the trans community.
I'm out of here.
I meet them and I greet them and I eat with them every day. The transubstantiation community. That community. That's the trans community. Right? We believe in transubstantiation. Something changing into something else. Who made that up? The Christians have always believed that. That's why I left the Baptists. That's why I left the Sydney Anglicans. That's why I stopped going to their prayer meetings. I stopped going to their talks. I stopped playing in their cricket team. Because I realised the Catholic Church, for all its problems, had the Eucharist. In the first 3 centuries of Christianity, all their writings, they had the Eucharist. I'm sorry. It's a fact.
Even the Didache. So
the Didache, it talks about we need to confess our sins before we receive the Eucharist. That's what we do in Mass. We confess our sins before we receive the Eucharist. It's there, it's from the beginning. All right, how are we doing? The time's about 9:30. How about we finish in 1 or 2 minutes if we've got one more question?
Robert.
What do we got? Yeah.
Sorry. One thing that I know, being a young adult and now especially connecting very early with my faith, when I was younger, parents if you come from a strong religious household, parents really enforce religion upon you, and naturally as a child, you generally try to rebel from what your mum and dad try to force. Being someone who, God willing, one day will have a family, I know I'm going to struggle with that issue of not necessarily forcing your kids, but getting them to gain an understanding of the higher power, who God is, Jesus, and like what the church is about, especially nowadays with social media, the agendas they're trying to push in schools to not traumatize these kids, but give them different views. Just wanted to know, in your experience, what conversations have you maybe had with parents who are struggling with these issues, and maybe someone like myself in the future, how I could address these things?
I'll just limit my answer to the last bit of your question. Advice to you. When I got married, I was terrified. I was terrified about the future in so many ways. Financially, because I know how my wife was spending. And I was worried about exactly what you said. How are my kids going to turn out? Are they going to be rebellious? I see all people, young people having problems. How am I was frightened to death. I'm not frightened anymore. I got 4 children, thanks God. 3 of them I couldn't be happier with, and the other one is doing okay. I'd still like her to be better, but she's doing okay. And as a friend of mine once said to me, Robert, don't expect all your children to be the same. They'll be different in temperament and how they adopt the faith and how they practice it. One thing I did right was that I brought other people into the house who were good people. So when my kids were growing up, I had an ex-student as a tutor. Came into the house every week, and they don't see the faith just from you. They see the faith from other young people. I sent them to Feddersanitz and Sharbles. It generally worked, right? And then I'd use a bit of reverse psychology. I never forced my kids to ever, you must pray the rosary. Now, it's 8 o'clock, sit with me. I never did it, ever. I prayed the rosary myself every day in the house. They see me. I let them, give them the freedom to choose whether they do it or not. They pray the rosary now because they adopted it themselves. Even my 4th child, she said to me the other day, Dad, my friends are coming over. Don't dress in those Vegemite pajamas, and if you don't, I'll pray a rosary. That's what she said. Someone bought me Vegemite pajamas for Christmas, all right? So I wear them, and don't wear them when my friends are coming. Now, so I think, okay, just to bring it down to one piece of advice, because everyone's an expert in parenting, and you hear a lot of advice, and you sometimes think this is too much, I can't do it all. You be faithful and bring other people into the house who you know are faithful. And that will help you. Because there's this thing called Nazareth syndrome, I call it. We're not prophets in our own home. Right? If Jesus got rejected by the local community because they knew him, we're going to suffer the same thing. So what you do to overcome that, bring other people into your home, other good people of influence that your children can see. All right? That will help. Use a bit of reverse psychology, like, you're not praying, I'm not letting you pray the rosary. Why not? You're not old enough. You're not strong enough. I'll show you, and they'll pray it. Reverse psychology. All right?
From my own experiences, especially mum and dad, they hammered it in front of you at a young age. Again, naturally kids just want to rebel, and at the end of the day, through the experiences you have, like you said, the people you surround yourself with, you begin to find your feet, and you let go, you submit.
Yeah, look, your parents, they were that way to you because their parents were that way to them. And that was the old way, and it had its value. Its effectiveness now is very, very limited, okay? But the best way for you to be is the way of integrity in the home. And that's hard. You've got to model it so that your children know you as someone who's always honest, always faithful, always loving. We fall, we'll make mistakes. Can't always be entirely loving all the time, but we do our best. You control the television.
And the social media.
You control that. And you tell them why you do what you did. 2 nights ago, watching this movie, which I rarely do, I'm sitting down with my wife and my youngest daughter, and watching this movie called Lincoln Lawyer. Okay? It's not a bad storyline. But suddenly out of the blue, there's this sex scene. I'm caught unaware. I'm on my couch, I've got a bad back, I can't move quick enough. Vegemite pajamas and all. But my younger daughter, she just gets the remote straight away and fast forwards it. Mission accomplished. When you get your kids to know, not just do censorship, but to know why you do the censorship, then they'll understand it, they'll do it themselves. You have to put your kids in a position that they're doing the right thing when you're not around. When you're not looking, and when that happens, mission accomplished. All right? And it's hard. But it's easier when you are trying to live the faith with integrity. You're always going to Mass. You're always praying. Have prayer in not just icons and pictures on the wall. I once went into a house which had more icons than the Greek Orthodox, right? Everywhere. And the family was chaos. Chaos. It was a Maronite home. Chaos. You model it. You have the icons, you have the pictures, you have the statues here and there, but you are modeling it, prayer in the home. They must see you pray in the home. As a father, your kids, especially your boys, must see you on your knees. Right? Don't force them to get on your knees. No, let them see you on your knees, and they'll inspire them to want to be on their knees one day.
If you haven't got any boys, you're all girls, eh?
The same rule. It's just that I believe, and it's the stats say it, if the dad models the faith in the home, I see this all the time, the same stats. If the dad's modeling the faith in the home, it's a 90% success rate the children will adopt the faith. If the dad does not, and it's only the mum, it drops to 17%. That's a proven fact. 17, 1-7, not 7-0, 1-7. There's something about it, the way we are, inbuilt, naturally, our nature, something about men and their leadership in the family. If they're exercising that leadership, it works. If they don't, sorry, the success rate drops enormously.
So if it's the same-sex couple, 2 men, is that 180%?
What are they modeling?
Oh no.
What are they modeling?
Different color pajamas.
All right. I think we'll finish there. You're most welcome. God bless you.